So we are going to start Fiori sessions in now, and it will take few weeks. Sonali, as you know, we'll do it slowly. And I just want to let you guys know that this is not very difficult. Okay, I don't know why they make such a big they make such a big deal out of this Fiori, because from a security standpoint, right, it's all about mainly two things. One, troubleshooting, and you need to know how to troubleshoot. And that's not rocket science also. Okay, it's, your simple str trace that you normally use, that is enough. And the second one is how to give access to the Fiori tiles and apps, right? That's a little different method, procedure, I would say. But you would still use the PFCG role to give access to Fiori apps. So instead of adding transaction codes into the role, you will add OData services and the groups and the catalogs or the pages or the spaces now. And all this information, you will get it from the developer, from the business, as to what needs to be added to a role. Okay, so the catalog ID, the group ID, the spaces ID, all of this, somebody is going to tell you to add the role that they want. Okay. It's like normal, the way your normal security normally works. It's not different. Only difference is instead of transactions, you have catalog IDs and group IDs. And secondly, another commonality would be if there is any authorization objects or authorization error that is missing, you want to provide access, give access to that authorization. And if you follow the SAP best practices, you would still go into SU24 and give access to, add the authorizations into SU24 and then update the rule. Same thing. There's no difference at all. Now, from a security standpoint, like I was saying, creating of catalog and the groups and pages and spaces now will be a responsibility of some other person. Okay, I would say most of the times, right? You may not get an opportunity on a project to do work with catalogs and spaces, catalogs and spaces and pages or whatever. The people are very strict, as when it comes to this. So my current project also, security team does not do any of catalog stuff. Somebody gives us, the catalog ID and the OData service, and what needs to be added, and security team just goes and adds it to the role. Okay, there are plenty of customers who do that. Very rarely you would find an opportunity where you can go and work with catalog creation type of areas. Okay, if it is in greenfield, yes, there's always a possibility that you will do it. You may get an opportunity to work at that level. Configuration, like we said, it's mainly a basis activity. But if you go to an implementation where the team is very small and it's very new, let's assume this scenario, right? For configuring Fiori, you go to a project where they're going to upgrade from ECC to S/4HANA, and then they decide to implement Fiori to begin with, right? They don't have Fiori. That could be a scenario where you could say and get an opportunity to configure Fiori also, meaning running the task lists and all. Otherwise, that primarily is a basis activity. Okay. So, like we just discussed a few minutes ago, we are going to cover Fiori, how to run the task lists. That will probably take a couple of days, I would say, because we will have to go through We'll go through the embedded task list, the deployment task list. We'll go through the central hub task list. Then we're going to talk about Fiori apps and how to read, understand the Fiori Launchpad. And then we'll go the traditional way of, the old school way of creating or implementing Fiori apps. Okay, transactional app, analytical app, and all that. Custom app. And then, like I said, this is not updated. We will also go about the content manager transaction codes and implementing Fiori, creating catalogs and all through the content manager tools. And then we'll do troubleshooting and all. So don't go by what you're seeing here, the number of sessions. It could be more. Okay. And Krishna, you may not be aware, but Sonali knows how I do it. It doesn't go the way I show here. It's always more than more than this. Okay, so this is what I did. When I did this for Anapredi last year. Okay, and even then we did not follow this. So because I always go extempore, so I don't try to follow this what I. Yeah, I'll cover everything, but not in a day one, day two type of strict manner. Okay. All right. So we'll do this, and then let's talk about Fiori. So what is a Fiori? So Fiori is a state-of-the-art role-based UI, user interface for SAP products. Now, when I take this as this, okay, Fiori to in a very simplistic way, it's like it's a portal. So you have enterprise portal, right? Imagine it's a portal, and it's a single point launchpad or entry for for your SAP related activities. Okay, and in another way to describe it in a very simplistic terms is that as your Fiori is going to be your future GUI, SAP GUI, meaning customers are already using, customers are already using Fiori concept, the Fiori interface to log into systems. It's not only about apps, the transactional app or analytical apps. Actually, customers are actually using Fiori interface as a GUI also. So what they do is, they create a tile for each customer, each system, each client within the system. There will be one, they create tiles. And they implement, let's assume they implement single sign-on, right? With any SAML authentication mechanism or, whatever a mechanism for single sign-on, when you click on the tile, it will log you into that particular system and client. So in my old custom project, right, we used to log in through enterprise portal. Okay, we used to go to the customer's intranet URL website, and from there you could go and log in to your SAP systems also, whether it is BW, ECC, CRM, whichever. So we didn't really need to use the GUI to log in. We could use the enterprise portal to access the SAP systems. Now customers are now replacing enterprise portal with Fiori interface. So they create tiles for each system and each client, like I said. Okay. So basically, you're using Fiori as a user interface now for accessing your SAP systems, as well as depending on what your role, your job functionality is, what you need to do in SAP, you have role-based tiles and apps configured for your access. Now, it is also one of the advantages that you have is it's like it's in a new user experience, right? UI interface for SAP applications, and then another big advantage you have is you have a lot of APIs, SDKs for mobile access also. So you can develop applications, your apps that are mobile enabled, which you can access through your iPads and iPhones and Android phones and all of that. So Fiori has this mobile deployment capabilities, and especially customers would want to do this when if somebody is involved in approving some things, right? Approving timesheets, or for a security standpoint, the closest you see is you're approving your GRC requests, for example. So that's why when you look at the GRC Fiori apps now, you will see every single app is mobile enabled. Meaning once you implement a Fiori GRC app, whether it is for running a risk analysis or if you want to create an access request, submit an access request, you can do that through your mobile device also. So SAP is mainly focusing on this Fiori technology, and my gut feeling is it is probably going to phase out on what do you call the SAP GUI in the near future. Okay, so and I keep telling Girish and my father friends also that this is the future now. I would rather work on S4HANA Fiori project than working on a GRC project, because next few years, in my opinion, across the world, people you'll see a huge large volume of customers upgrading to S4HANA, and when they upgrade to S4HANA, they are going to do 18 on so 2021, 2022, whatever, and implementing Fiori is going to be a mandatory thing for all of them. Okay, and down the line, when SAP starts, telling them to implement Fiori, force customers to implement Fiori. And you will see when we do this Fiori content manager thing, right? And when you go through SAP library also tomorrow, you will see there are tons of SAP GUI related apps. Okay, so which means for SAP transaction codes also, SAP is giving you now tiles and apps. So when that is available for you, why would anybody want to give access to the users via GUI when they can do it from one place? And the advantage of Fiori is one single page, one single point of access to any of your SAP applications through the styles and all. Okay, so you don't need SAP GUI for really speaking down the line. And then, like I said, mobile capabilities. You can access all of this through your mobile devices also. Okay. Now, the design principles of Fiori is based on these 5 concepts. Okay, role-based, adaptive, coherent, and simple, delightful. Role-based is like the way you work with your roles now, right? You give access to people depending on what their role is, and what they need to work on. Okay, so each of the transaction codes that you have, right, or access that the user has, that is divided into Fiori apps. It could be one single app, or the functionality could be divided into multiple apps. The idea behind is to make it as simple as possible for users. Okay, so the simplicity principle is you have one user, one use case, one business case, and the entire transaction or activity has to be completed in three steps. Okay, but when you look to, for example, when you want to create a purchase order, right, in SAP GUI, you'll have to go through different screens, so many screens. sometimes, if you're, in the beginning, it becomes a little confusing also to go through that many screens, right? So using Fiori, SAP basically has, wants to make it simple. You do maximum of three screens, right? And your transaction should be completed. So one user, one use case, right? So simple activities, right? You divide a complicated transaction or transaction code that you have too many screens to go through. Split that into smaller screens, smaller number of screens. Okay, so using Fiori, that is what the SAP is trying to achieve. Okay, and once that is, and again, it's again your role-based concept is not going anywhere. Okay, you still give access to users based on what they need. Okay, and the technology is uses is based on the HTML5, UI5 concept. So that that helps in adaptability to mobile environments also. Okay. Any questions so far? Yes. So for example, right, one good example of that, right, SAP is focusing on it. For example, if you look at, remember the other day when we did security notes, the screenshots, I showed you the screenshots, I think. And if you look at uh, the early watch reports, did I show you that the other day? So remember, they were all Fury related tiles. HANA cockpit, for example, right? If you go to SAP HANA database, instead of using HANA Studio nowadays, SAP is focusing on HANA cockpit for administration activities, which is also Fury type interface. So all your solution huh? No, they will not. See, traditional people, the old school guys, who have got used to doing using HANA Studio. And, we still go and use HANA Studio. For example, me, right? If today, if somebody, let's say, wants me to create a role, a catalog role, or a user ID, whatever, right? My first instinct is to go to this place, HANA Studio. But you also have Web IDE, which is a URL-based interface for HANA, where you can go and do the stuff on the website also. Using a URL, you can go and create user IDs, catalog roles, repository roles, all of that from a security administration standpoint. But my first instinct is go to HANA Studio. Okay? Today for Fiori, for example, right? If somebody says, go and create a catalog in 2020, for example, this S4HANA 2020, environments, if somebody is asking me to create a catalog or a group, my first instinct is to go to Launchpad Designer. I will not use, my thought would not come, to use this Launchpad Content Manager tool, that GUI transaction code. Because that's how my brain is, tuned to. Another example I gave you, the ST01 ST or trace. Somebody asked me in an interview, how will you troubleshoot? Do you know authorization issues? And then I said SC53 and then I said ST01 because that's what I have been used to all these years. Then he said, no, why not ST trace? He had to remind me of that, right? Similarly, yeah, maybe I went off tangent, off topic, but to answer your question, yes, SAP is slowly focusing on giving access to administration related activities through Fiori now. All your solution manager solutions that SAP configures, your basis administrator configures, all of that is done through Fiori now. If I want to, I don't have access now, but all the SAP security notes that I need to analyze for my customer, for example, all the early watch reports that I need to analyze for my customer, those reports are available to me through Fiori interface. I will execute a transaction code. It will launch a Fiori launchpad where I will have all these solutions that are configured. And then when I click on the tiles, I don't know if I can show you the screens. I need to figure that out. Wait. This is what I don't get it. I don't know where I put it also. Where the heck did it go? Oh, where was that? You see this here? So these are all Fiori, right? So this is actually configured in your solution manager box, right? So if you see here, right, change management, release management, there's a tile. If they want to configure anything with charm or anything, right, people have to come here and do it. Administration cockpit, okay? For us, license management, for these are all basis related activities. For system recommendation is what your SAP notes are all about. Security notes, okay? So depending on your environment of what monthly, release, we spoke about this, right? SAP releases SAP security notes every second Tuesday of the month. So if I have to do any type of analysis, I go here, I log in to my solution manager box, execute this transaction code. That will bring up this particular screen for me. And then I come here, change management, and then click on this tile. So you see, right, SAP is slowly focusing on Fiori concept. Okay. Now, you can create transaction codes, Fiori tiles for any transaction code you want. Okay, there are methods to do it. So any administration type of activity you want to give access to, if there is a transaction code available for it, you can create a Fiori tile for it. Okay? Did I answer that question? All right. Krishna, any questions? Correct. So we'll learn all of that, okay? We'll go through all of that. So let's assume, you have a transaction code and SAP does not give you an app for it. Okay. So you can go and create a tile manually for the transaction code. So every tile has to be part of a catalog. Okay. And then the way when if you want that tile to be visible to the user, you need to make it a part of you need to assign that to a group next. Okay. Which is not a mandatory thing. Okay. You can put it in a catalog and there is a different way mechanism to access that app. But when you put it in a group, you see it like this. You will see the tile like this. You will see it like this. A box like this for that app. And when you click on it, the transaction codes get executed. No. Technically speaking, they are not the same. Okay. But when you try to do it right, that's extremely thin line in what is the difference between a catalog and a group. Catalog is your collection of your aisles. It's like a role. Don't take it literally. Okay, a role. You collect all your related apps based on a particular criteria, right? Like a functionality. Let's say, for example, you can take all the transaction codes related to security. You create a security role, right? So catalog is something similar. You have catalog based on a business functionality, grouping of apps based on some criteria. Okay. Now, a group is also a collection of tiles and apps. Okay. But in a group, the tiles or the apps can come from different catalogs. It's like a composite role. Don't take it literally, okay? I'm just trying to, help you understand the difference between a catalog and a group, comparing it with the single roles and composite roles. No, that's the second. No, I'm coming to that. Now you use a group because you want the users to see the tiles. See, for example, on the top you see here, right? You have all these things, the titles that you have here on the top. They are groups. Okay. So if you want, and because of the groups, I'm able to see these tiles. So if you want to make the tiles and apps visible, then you put the tiles and apps into the groups and then assign that group to the user. Only then the user can see it. Remember, see it. I'm saying not access it. I'm saying see it. The access of when I click on the app comes from what you have in the catalog. See, for example, right here, this change management, change release management can come from catalog A. Administration cockpit can come from catalog B. Change control management can come from catalog C. If I assign this group, I can see all of this. But if on behind in my role, if I don't assign catalog A or catalog B or catalog C, when I click on any of the styles, it is not going to work. You understand the difference? Okay, so because the actual authorizations that you need is in the catalog. No, the tile authorizations are maintained in the role. Okay, so that is why when you create the role, there are three things you need to do mainly, okay, to make this properly work. One, I need to assign this group ID, which your group has these tiles. I have to assign that group ID. That is why only then I can see the tiles. I can see the tiles, remember, I can see. See is the keyword here. But when I want to use any of these apps, then there are two things. I need to, I said three things in the beginning, right? First thing is the group. Two, seeing this tiles. Okay. Second thing is accessing the tiles. Okay. Accessing the tiles has two components, two things to it that you need to keep in mind. One, the catalog ID, the catalog in which you have the tile. So catalog A, catalog B, and catalog C. So if I need access to all these three, I need to give first access to all the three catalogs. Okay. No, that's the first part to it. Okay. Second part to it is every catalog, think of a tile as a transaction code. Think of a tile, every single tile as a transaction code. Think, imagine. So how does the transaction code work? Because when you execute a transaction code basically is a shortcut for executing a series of programs or function modules behind the scenes. Right? Similarly, a tile is a shortcut to accessing a series of transaction codes, not transaction programs or data services for that particular application. So in your role, you need to assign the catalog ID, then also the OData services related to that particular functionality. And OData services will bring in the authorization objects. Then you make correct. No, so you add, instead of adding a transaction code to a role, you will add a OData service related to the app. And then, like you normally do, maintaining authorizations, you maintain the authorizations. And the authorization also has to come from SU24. We'll take a look when we create the transactional app and everything, right? All of that, right? We'll go through the cycle. And that's all all the steps. Okay. Any other question? Don't get confused. Now, this is pretty simple. Fiori is absolutely easy. Just keep in mind when you come to creating the roles, just keep that in mind. What the steps? There are hardly 4-5 steps you need to think about. Okay, so don't worry. This is pretty, very simple. Okay. Now, what are the deployment options? So you have S4HANA on cloud. Then you have the embedded for S4HANA. You have the embedded deployment. In an embedded deployment, the S4, the backend system, your S4 system, and the Fiori front-end component, they're all in the same system. Okay. Now, from a terminology standpoint, Fiori systems are often referred to as FES. Okay, front-end system, and your backend systems are referred to as BES, backend system. Okay. So in S4HANA, which SAP is now recommended heavily, is to go with an embedded deployment, meaning you have S4HANA and Fiori on the same box. In a central hub, where when it says Fiori with the standalone, S4HANA with a standalone, which is basically a central hub, you have one Fiori system and the backend systems are in another system, another box. I'm talking about app servers, physical app servers. They're on two different instances. So you'll have FES, you'll have one SID, S4HANA, you'll have another SID, like this. So if you go here, right, let's say S4HANA is S4H. These are technically different systems. See, the IP addresses are here, one and this. So when you use Fiori and S4HANA combination, this is a central hub deployment. But if you use Fiori on the same box, right, in S4HANA here, that is a embedded deployment. Okay? You understood? Okay, so another thing you need to remember is when you do embedded central hub, right, there are some additional activities or authorizations that you need to think about. Mainly this. One, the communication between the S4 system and the Fiori system has to be, SAP prefers you created a trusted RFC. Okay? When you created a trusted RFC, every single user who is going to use Fiori will need SN access to this authorization object. S underscore RFC is here. So there are some additional steps you need to do in a central hub. Okay. So in a central hub, and the thing is, the few users will execute the Fiori launchpad. What they see through, depending on what groups are assigned to them, is, for example, when I come here, so what I see here is coming from the Fiori system, the front-end system. But when I click on some tile, the data, the authorizations is consumed or, is fetched from the backend system. You followed? FES, Fiori is your, like what it says, front-end system. That's it, front-end. But when you click on the tile, the access, the data consumption of the app, that authorization checks and everything, data comes from the backend system. Followed? Now, the trusted RFC is your the method of communication, right? So if you want to you want two systems to communicate, what do? You create an RFC connection, correct? Trusted RFC is also an RFC connection. Okay. Now, difference between a trusted RFC and your normal RFC that you know, right? In a normal RFC, you also give access. You have a batch user ID or RFC user ID that you use, right? In a trusted RFC scenario, your own user ID is used for communicating. You don't need a batch user ID for that. Okay. So because it's a trusted RFC, that is why every single user needs to have access to these two objects basically. Okay. I don't need, so Fiori, when I create a Fiori setup, configure Fiori, I don't need to create a batch user ID for that. I can simply create a trusted RFC and use my own user ID for communicating. Okay. What is that? Your user ID is a dialog user, no? In a trusted RFC, your own user ID is used. But in a normal RFC, you create a communication type or system type user ID. Okay, we'll see now how you do this when we do Fiori configuration. We'll check some of these things out. Okay. Now, from an embedded deployment standpoint, okay, conceptually, embedded deployment is S/4HANA and Fiori on the same system. In a central hub, S/4HANA and Fiori are on different systems. And when they are on different systems, you have to create RFC connections, and SAP recommends that for a central hub environment, you create a trusted RFC connection. And when you create a trusted RFC connection, every user needs to have access to this authorization object, RFC ACL. Okay. What other differences are there, we'll see in the next slides. Okay. So if you see here, embedded deployment, you have the Fiori Launchpad, the GUI interface, where people can see what tabs are, assigned to them and execute them. But in the behind the scenes, embedded deployment, the front-end component, the back-end component, and the HANA database, they're all on the same box. Okay. In a central hub, the front-end and the HANA database, they are in one box, and the back-end system is in another box. Okay. Now keep in mind, S/4HANA needs HANA database, okay? But if you are using Fiori on Suite and HANA, okay, then it could be an Oracle SQL database also. But for S/4HANA, mandatory thing is the database has to be a HANA database. Okay. Now here I have listed, the Fiori kind of differences between central hub and embedded deployment. It's a big list of categories. So for example, administration, you have 2 different systems to administer. Okay. And embedded, you do only one. Okay. Similarly, single point of access. Okay. And what else is more important here? I will send you, I have this in an Excel file, courtesy my friend. He did this amazing, listing. I'll share this with you because this could be one of your interview questions also. Okay, what is the difference between a central hub and embedded deployment? What is your recommendation to a customer? Would you recommend a central hub and an embedded? What would you recommend to your customer? So this list will give you some idea about how to manage those questions. It's not only the interview, right? Even the customer, if you go on a greenfield type of implementation, this is something the customer may also ask. Okay, so I'll give you this. So installation has multiple systems. This is only one system. Okay. What else? I'm trying to see what makes more sense to you. Centralized launchpad for all applications, multiple launchpad. So if you have embedded deployment, right? In this case, for example, what it means is S/4HANA 2020 is embedded here, GRC is embedded here, right? So I'll have one launchpad for this. For GRC, another launchpad for S4HANA. So multiple launchpads. But if I do a central hub, then I have single launchpad. So I can a central hub, I can configure ECC, I can configure GRC, I can configure Fiori, and I can configure S4HANA, and have only one launchpad to access. Okay, so if you go with the embedded, each and every system here, for example, for assuming there's all these 4 systems are embedded for Fiori, then you have to access via 4 launchpads, 4 different launchpads. Okay, so that's what it means. Multiple launchpads. From a security also, this is the key. Okay, from a security standpoint, in an embedded deployment, in a central hub deployment, you will have to create roles in both the systems, in the front end as well as in the back end. Okay, in a central hub. In an embedded, so which means in a central hub, you have one front end role with group IDs and technical catalog IDs, because that are group IDs and catalog IDs are front end specific, and the authorizations are coming from the back end, right? So you will create another role in the backend system to give access to the OData services and maintain the authorizations. So for the app, for the user to app to work, user needs to exist in the front end system as well as the back end system, and then he has to have the front end role with the group ID and the catalog ID in the FES Fiori system, and then the backend role with the OData services and the required authorizations in the S4HANA system. So for one Fiori app, you're maintaining two roles in 2 different systems in a central hub. But in embedded, everything is in the same role, one role. So that means you don't really need to worry also about the role naming convention and all of that little things. Okay. So like I just said, users have to be created in both the systems. And here in embedded, it's only one user ID. Any questions here? See, one main thing I would say would think about it, right? 2 different systems means 2 different hardware. Hardware meaning cost, from money, right? They have to maintain the servers, memory and all that. Secondly, the maintenance cost, administration cost. Correct. Secondly, right, if you are in a central hub, and and you are, let's assume, you have one Fiori system central hub, and you have S4HANA, you have PW, you have CRM and whatnot, and for all of them use Fiori, right? If the Fiori system goes down, unless you're using password login mechanism in each of the systems, if your Fiori system goes down, everything goes down. People cannot log in, because in a single sign-on setup, and typically passwords are deactivated in the target systems, because single sign-on uses some kind of certificate and tickets and all that, right? So passwords are deactivated. So if Fiori goes down, then people cannot log into the systems, right? So that is another thing you need to think about. But embedded deployment, right? If S4HANA goes down, people are still not impacted with BW, or CRM or whatever other systems you have, solution manager, whatever other systems you have. People can still continue to work with those systems. No, in an embedded deployment, Fiori and backend system, they're all separate boxes, correct? They're all in the same box. Correct. So in an embedded scenario, if one system goes down, it does not impact the other systems. See, I have 4 systems here, right? Let's say S4HANA goes down. This is embedded deployment. Let's assume that all of them are embedded deployment. S4HANA goes down. Remaining 3, I can continue to work, no? But in a central hub, no, Sonali. No, I didn't understand. No, Fiori, I have Fiori here, I have Fiori here, I have Fiori here in embedded. See, remember the word embed, right? Embed is something within something. Okay? So Fiori is embedded here, Fiori is embedded here. I have, Fiori embedded here, 4 different. So all these 4 are their own Fiori systems. So they are independent of this, right? So if this goes down, I still work on this. See, that is what the problem is, no? So if I want to use any of these 4 systems, I have to log into each of those 4 systems. So it's like this, yeah. For example, this goes down. Forget about Fiori. Forget about Fiori. If this goes down, I can continue to work with this. I can continue to work with this. Now, I can continue. This is a GUI, right? So if I double click on this, the hell, this GRC is down. What the heck? I can continue to work on this. See, GRC was down, right? But I can go and work with EPH and ECC. I can work with HANA. Just because GRC is down, it's not impacted, no? Similarly, so I'm accessing the system through GUI now, right? But if I have Fiori embedded in it, I will access the system through Fiori, right? Through the URL. So GRC goes down. When I execute or launch that Fiori launchpad for GRC, it's not going to work. But when I launch the Fiori launchpad for HANA, S4, it is going to work because the system is up. So my S4 is not impacted, right? So that is the advantage of embedded. The problem with that is if you have 10 different systems here, you have 10 different Fiori launchpads, one for each, right? In a central hub, it's a single launchpad, one Fiori. And for that one Fiori, remaining systems are configured into that Fiori. So if that Fiori box goes down, I cannot access any of the systems. You followed? Have you worked with CUA? Central user administration. Okay, so it is easy for you to understand. Okay, central user administration. Central user administration is one central client to manage your user IDs in all your SAP systems, correct? CUA, imagine CUA as your central hub. Okay, so what happens in a CUA? When you configure CUA, you cannot create user IDs in the child systems, right? So let's assume your central system goes down. Can you create user ID in your child systems? Similarly, in a central hub, the Fiori box, Fiori system is your CUA central client. So if that goes down, Fiori box goes down, people cannot access the remaining clients, remaining systems. I mean, from an administration standpoint, I know it's not a good example. I'm just trying to explain it to you. The point is, in a central hub, Fiori goes, system goes down. It impacts the child systems also, the connected systems. In an embedded, each and every system is on its own. So one goes down, it does not impact the others. Followed? Krishna, did you understand? Girish, did you understand? Okay, all right. But yeah, so I'll send you this Excel file, okay? So just keep in mind, and then, that I'm just explaining this to you because this could be an interview question also for you. Or, if you go to a customer place and, they may ask, okay, tell me what advantages or disadvantages do I have, comparing embedded and central. I'll try to send you this Excel file, okay? I hope my friend will be okay. Okay, so prerequisites for implementing Fiori. This is an old one, like I said. But the point is you need to have this gateway foundation installed. So if I go here, let's go and take a look. Okay, gateway foundation, this one. Okay, this component has to be installed. So the minimum is 750, but we are now everybody whenever they upgrade to S4HANA or whatever, right? They're going to be way beyond that. Okay, so minimum was 750 in the previously, and now whatever 752. It doesn't matter. Now don't worry about this. If somebody is going to implement Fiori, they would definitely be above this. Second thing is you need to have the SAP UI component. Minimum is 752, which is this component, SAP UI. So you need this component also installed. And I think whenever they have VCC or Suit on HANA type of systems, they definitely will have this. Okay, so don't worry about it, but these are some of the things you need to check if that's new implementation or they want to implement Fiori in the UI basis component. So, which is this one. Okay. No, that one, not that, sorry. you should have UI pass somewhere here. There has to be one more here for technical things. I'll check with the other systems. I think it should be there. But there's one more for this. Okay. So these are the prerequisites. Okay. The gateway component has to be installed and then UI component has to be installed for implementing Fiori. Those are prerequisites. UI, Fiori UX. This is how basically when you log in, we already saw that, right, in this particular screen, how the UI interface looks. So on the top that you see is your user groups. Now with pages and spaces, it will look little different. Okay. So these are the groups. These are the tiles. Okay. Apps or tiles, whatever you call it. And whenever you click on a group, it will take you directly to that particular that group content will come on the top. Okay, so when I click on, let's say, business process operations, whatever apps, tiles I have under that, it will come on the top. Okay, but this is all one single page right now. Okay, now there are different, the groups are assigned as per your roles. Okay. It's not as if, you have 20 groups in the system, you get access to all the 20 groups. No. You access to the groups or the tiles based on your role. Okay. Now, these are the tiles. Okay. And if you see a number on a tile, that means it probably is a analytical app. Some, and you can do some, it has some analytical functionality within it. Okay. So you have groups, then these are part of, tiles are part of catalogs. You use groups to make the tiles visible. And the tiles in the groups can come from different catalogs. Okay, so you'll understand that when we create a catalog, okay? And the group. When we do transactional app, and analytical, when we just practice or start working on the implementing apps, you will see, you'll get clarity on the catalog and the groups. Okay. So don't worry about it. It's all matter of getting used to this. Okay. Don't worry about what you're seeing here right now. In next few classes, you'll understand this. And personalization is something you have an option when you go. I hope that is still active. Personalization is, why am I not getting to that website? Okay. Okay, personalization is this, how you can, personalize your launchpad. Okay, so you can come here, go to settings, And if you want to change the color of this background color, right, you can do those kinds of personalization. If I do this here, save it. If you see the screen change, the color changes. So whatever you want to do, personalize this launchpad screen, you can do that. So you can remove the apps, add groups. You can create your own group here again if you want to. You don't need to use the roles and the groups that are coming from your role. You can create your own groups here also. We'll check some of these things out, okay, as we proceed. So that's what personalization means, okay, what you can do there. So when we do, implement the apps, create the catalogs and all, you'll slowly get used to this interface. Okay, don't worry much about this. So, but yeah, remember that, what you see is, on the screen depends on the access that you have. Okay. How can you access Fiori? Okay. There are multiple ways of accessing Fiori. One is using the web browser. You can execute this transaction code, what I just did, to trigger the browser. Or if you have the browser URL, the Launchpad URL, you can directly use that URL from your favorites, the browser favorites. You can store that in your favorites in the browser and click on it. Use that also. You don't need to use transaction code. Okay. But that's an option, using a transaction code. Now, we also have something called as a Fiori business client. It's like SAP GUI, screen, SAP GUI, but then in that you have to maintain for every system, you need to maintain a URL. Okay, so that's another way of accessing Fiori using the business client. And I think there is another interface. I have not used this, but there is an interface for Fiori client itself. Okay, so you can download that, and this is actually in mobile devices also. Okay, so you can access Fiori using Fiori client also. So primarily there are two ways for you as an administrator. One is using this transaction, and the other is using this browser. For the end users, they will use the browser. Okay, once the Fiori is configured, for the Launchpad, you give access to you provide this URL to the users. Okay, so that they can log in through the browser instead of through the GUI. See, when you want to execute the transaction, somebody has to log in. You have to log into the GUI, right? End users, you don't need to. It's like this, right? For in GRC, you have the end user page. So you don't really, give them access to the GRC system, right? They use the end user page to create the access request, something similar. Okay, so you give this URL to them. This is the format, this is the syntax of that URL. So then you have the host name, your server name and the port number, and then the remaining standard stuff. Okay. How many types of apps you have, right? This could be another interview question, and people have asked me this. That's why I know. Okay, so mainly you have these many apps. Mainly these two. These three actually, four. This I'm saying four now because SAP has slowly started giving access to GUI apps now, transaction codes as apps. This was not a feature, it started in 1809, I think mainly. But in 22, now it's very heavy now. Every catalog, almost every catalog that you see now will also have this transaction codes listed in it. And we'll see that tomorrow when we focus on Fiori apps library tomorrow. we'll look into this, some of these things. Okay, we'll understand this tomorrow. When we'll understand how to read transactional apps. The data related to transactional app, analytical apps, and all. Okay, so there are mainly five categories of apps, and if you want to include one more, I would say. I don't know what this thing is. Oh my God, I didn't touch this for so many. I really need to work on my present decks now. Anyway, so one more if you want to add, include, right? And that example of that is Fiori apps for GRC. They are all WebDen Pro based. Okay, so if you want to add WebDen Pro to the types of apps, then you are talking about 6. Now, custom apps is something that you create on your own. Okay, now there are 2 ways of creating custom apps. One, customers can develop their own UI5 applications. Okay, the ABAP developer or UI5 developer will do those apps, and they'll create a tile for those applications. Another way of another mechanism, a custom example of a custom app is, let's say, you create a custom transaction code. Okay, a Z transaction code, and you want to give access to that Z transaction code through Fiori, right? Then you create a custom tile for it. Similarly, if you have a transaction code, SAP standard transaction code that does not have a SAP delivered tile or app, okay, SAP GUI app, then you can create your own tile for that transaction code. Okay, so we'll see how to create those kinds of apps also. Transactional apps, I don't know if it is in this slide. Yeah, this slide. So let's talk about what are transactional app, right? So transactional app is an application app for that when you click, it's like a transaction code, right? Where you go and execute a transaction code and you make changes to the data in the system. So transactional apps are those kinds of apps where you can go and make changes into the system. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And they can be run on any database. Okay. That's HANA. Having HANA DB is not a prerequisite for transactional apps. So basically, they're all whatever you can do in SAP from a change display type of create, change, delete type of activities. Any app that lets you do that in Fiori is a transactional app. Okay. Analytical app is basically your display type of apps. Okay, it's like your reporting apps. Okay, but for that, you also need to have, there are some OData services and virtual data models, that you need to activate, KPIs that you need to activate this using these apps, because these apps also give you, like I said, analytical information, right? Doing some analysis and giving that information to you. And that information can be pure text in tabular format or through graphs. Okay, so analytical app, but the way you deploy or configure this transactional app and analytical apps, they are the same. From a security standpoint, it's the same. The purpose is different. One is for actually working with the data in the system, transactional app, and analytical apps is basically for analysis purposes. But there are some prerequisites, like some virtual data models and some OData services are there are some list of OData services that also need to be activated for this. So there is for transactional app, there are no special requirements like that, where you have very specific OData services to activate. For transactional apps, you only activate the OData services related to that app. But in analytical, along with the app-specific OData service, there are some mandatory OData services for analytical purposes that you need to register also. Another difference between this one, transactional app and analytical app is transactional app work on any database, but for analytical app, it has to be on S/4HANA. And this is one of the certification questions. Fact sheet apps, there is no specific requirement, or data service type of activation requirement for this. It has a different requirement because the purpose of fact sheet apps is not something that you can see, and execute. It is basically for searching. So if you want to search on a, for example, a criteria, right, like a search, purchase orders or sales orders or something. So you will need to activate or deploy apps related to that criteria. So fact sheet apps are mainly for searching purposes. Okay, and there is a different process to do this. It's not the same as analytical app and transactional app. For this, there is a task list that you need to activate. And the information related to task list that you need to use for the search capabilities, for deploying the search capabilities, that information you will get it from the Fiori library. And we will see how to do that also. And for this also, you require the HANA database. So between the three apps, right, transactional, analytical, and fact sheet, only transactional can work on any database, but for analytical and fact sheet, they have to be on HANA database. Okay, and here I have some SICF services that need to be activated for fact sheet, along with the search model. They call search model that needs to be configured using a task list. We'll see what that is, okay, when you come to that point. And Fiori App Reference Library is your store of all your Fiori apps, of SAP delivered Fiori apps, okay? It could be transaction, fact sheet, SAP GUI, WebKit Pro, and you can see that, they are configured from, when you see search, go back. And we'll talk about this in little detail tomorrow, okay? We'll only focus on this because it's very important. So you come here, you can filter by specific, HANA releases, your business suite is your ECC system, apps for your suite on HANA systems, your cloud systems, you need to understand this well. So if I go here and I say all apps, and then I come here and you get all the app related information. Okay, so we'll talk about it detail tomorrow, but you will normally come here. The functional people will normally come here, okay, to prepare their requirement documentation. You can come here if somebody wants you to deploy this app, right? or create a role for this particular app, you need to know certain technical information related to that. Okay, so one of the main things you need is this. So they will give you this information, or they may or may not give you what you need, this information, and then you also need, uh, where is that? Okay, somewhere it has to be. This information also, the catalog. Okay, but this is the SAP standard way, right? But if they create their own custom catalog and all, so they need that catalog also. Okay, so we'll use some of this when we do the content manager concept, the tool, the new tool. Okay, so Fiori library is yours a database for all your apps, and every time, anytime the Fiori, they add an app, this numbers will change. So totally today here, you have 14,922 apps overall. Okay, with what it means is it includes everything, total lot. What are apps? You have 14,000 apps, and 13,000 are related to S4HANA. So remaining whatever thousand something is related to some other cloud and suite on HANA type of systems. Okay, so that's something. This one we'll talk about later. There's a video on the channel also, how to use this. And it's extremely important when you do an upgrade, when you do a greenfield. This is extremely useful. Okay, and we'll talk about some of the other little things, nice things till tomorrow when we do this in detail. The Fiori apps library, reference library, is a collection of your Fiori apps. Okay, and you can go to Google, just search for Fiori apps library, and you will get this URL. And use Google, because when you do that in Google, it comes from the very first link that you get is the same one. But if you try, I don't know why, but when you try to do it in Edge or Internet Explorer, this URL doesn't show up at all. You really have to struggle to find where it is. But so you use Google to search for Fiori apps library. Okay, and trust me, you will end up using this a lot. Anytime you want to implement an app, a new app, you want to find any information about that app, this is the place to go to. So there's a very heavy usage thing. So try to understand this as well as you can. Okay, go go through the screens, try to understand what you see, and learn. So this is an example of what we were looking at. So you search for the Fiori app that you want, and the Fiori app will give you certain, library will give you the information that you need. So for example, and we'll talk about it in detail again tomorrow. So if I go here, and if I click on this, that's an example. So if you see, it is going to give you what platform. It will give you a list of Fiori apps, versions. Okay. It is going to give you the line of business. What is the app title? The tile, when you see the tile for this app, you will see this description on the tile. What type of app is this? It's an analytical app. HT analytical apps are specific to HANA database. And the data from this app you can execute on a desktop as well as a tablet, not on phones. So this app is not compatible with a phone. It is compatible with only desktop and tablet. And this is the app ID. App ID is important for a couple of reasons. One, if somebody, you can go, they'll give you this app ID, for example, right, as a business requirement. Now go and deploy this app. So you can come to HANA library, Fiori library, and search for this app to see these details. And if you want to maintain your Fiori matrix, role matrix, this is a piece of information that you need. One important why you need this app ID to be noted down for whatever apps you implement is because if a functionality is not working for this app, for your customer, right? And you want to end up create an OSS incident, SAP incident message, you cannot just simply tell them this. Oh, we are trying to implement cash flow analyzer app and all. For them, for SAP guys, it really helps them if you give them the app ID. And then, you also have, and I don't know how to use it, the extensibility concept here. So if you want to add, it's like your baddies and your user exits, I think. So if you want to extend the functionality of an app, SAP gives you that facility also, and you can get all the required information that you want from the Fiori apps library. So understanding this is extremely important. Okay, let's assume in a scenario, right? They tell you, oh, I want to implement this app, and you are the person who is supposed to create the catalog, the groups, the roles, and everything, right? So it is very essential for you to understand how to read this page, this the information coming out of the app library, and that is what we are going to do tomorrow. Okay, so very important for you to understand Fiori library. Okay, so it has basically three pieces of information, categories of information. Okay, one is the product feature. This is not for you, or maybe for you, but mainly for the functional guys to know what that app does. What is the functionality of that app? So that is part listed in the product features tab. Implementation information will get you the technical information that you read. That is where you come in. Okay, if somebody says you do this, implement this app, you need to come here, implementation information, and gather some information for yourself. Okay, we'll talk about what that is tomorrow. Okay, this is basically an overview of 3-4 different tabs or the information that you need. Okay, the implementation information. You need pieces of information coming from in configuration section. And then if you scroll down, you will see some information related to the tile. App launcher is the tile name, okay? So you need to go to that catalog, wherever it is. I don't think I have the screenshot here. You go to the catalog and then look for this tile. Okay, we'll see all of that when we come to that, okay? So point here is, it's extremely important, your apps library. And we just briefly spoke, we'll talk about the Fiori Launchpad Designer tomorrow, or maybe not tomorrow, in the next sessions, after next week maybe. We'll try to read and understand what are the different interfaces for Launchpad Designer. And this concept will change a little bit when we go to pages and spaces. Okay, same screen. Okay, but we'll see how pages and spaces will look compared to groups in what you see today. Okay, so catalog contains a collection of tiles basically. Okay, and target mapping is part of the tile. Okay, they go together. So we'll talk about it when we do transactional labs and analytical labs. Okay, it's a basically target catalog, like I said, is a collection of tiles. Group is also a collection of tiles, but probably the tiles come from different catalogs. So I would say, group is a collection of tiles from different catalogs. And catalog is a collection of apps, tiles, based on a certain functionality, certain criteria. So for example, right, I can have a catalog for, see, finance is such a big area, no? You have accounts payable, you have GL, you have receivables, you have treasury, whatnot. So I can create a different catalog, one catalog for apps related to accounts payable. I can create a catalog for apps related to accounts receivables. Okay. Now, if I know, I can, further, categorize the apps, right? Within AP, accounts payable, if I can further categorize them based on certain functionality, right? Within accounts payable, I can go and create a catalog for that subgroup. I don't have to create one big accounts payable catalog. It's like this, right? SUIM. So let's just take security. Or if let's take basis administration, right? In basis administration, you have monitoring related activities, you have database related activities, you have transport related activities, correct? So I can create a catalog with all the functionalities into all transports and monitoring and database and whatever administration related activities into one catalog, right? Or I can create one catalog with apps related to transports, another catalog for the apps related to monitoring, another catalog related to some other system relation, administration related activity. Okay, but when I want to give access to the basis administrator, right, I don't want to give each and every access. So I'll pick, okay, STMS from transport management, SM04 from system administration, and RZ10 for profile maintenance. Take all of that and put it into one group. So I'm picking and cherry picking, right? I'm choosing what I want. Following? So a group then becomes a subset, or apps come from different catalogs now. More simplistically, right? Let's say, I want to create a security role, give access to security. PFCG, SUPC will be in one catalog. SU01, SU10 is in another catalog. SUIM is in another catalog. I'm splitting up, right? But depending on what that functionality is. And then I create a group saying PFCG, SU01, and SUIM, and put that in one group. So the apps are coming from 3 different catalogs, right? But they're still tiles, still apps. Okay? If you're not still following, you will. when we create the catalog and a group. So don't to worry too much about it. For now, think about group as a single role, catalog as a composite role, in a very simplistic manner. And how they are displayed here is when we'll see when we come to this point, the Launchpad Designer. Okay, the screenshot is not really clear. We'll talk about the group ID and all of that. I'll show you this when we come to that point. All right, I think it's very late for you guys and for me also. I took too much of time, like usual.